Beneath the echoing chants and flickering candlelight of medieval monasteries lay a secret world, one built not on prayer alone, but on defiance. Picture this: centuries ago, monks who had sworn vows of poverty and obedience risked everything to carve hidden chambers beneath their very altars, burying treasures and truths too dangerous for kings to find. These weren't just storerooms, they were acts of quiet rebellion, where ink-stained hands guarded forbidden knowledge, sacred relics, and fortunes that could topple thrones. The question isn't just what they hid, it's why. What could compel men of God to deceive their own rulers, to engineer labyrinths of stone and silence, all to keep secrets from the world above? The answer lies in the bell towers. Those soaring spires, symbols of faith and order, were also the perfect disguise. While kings and bishops gazed upward at their grandeur, few thought to look down where monks had hollowed out the earth like hidden architects. Behind false walls and beneath trapdoors, they stashed gospels that challenged the church's teachings, records of royal scandals, and gold that could buy armies. Some secrets were so explosive that discovering them meant death. Others held power so potent, even monks trembled to speak of them aloud. This wasn't just concealment, it was a sacred conspiracy, one that spanned generations and crossed kingdoms. Today, we're stepping into their shadows, with every crumbling manuscript and radar blip revealing a buried chamber. We piece together a puzzle these monks never intended to be solved. But their vaults are more than historical curiosities, they're time capsules of fear, faith, and defiance. As we trace their hidden passages and decode their cryptic symbols, we're not just uncovering lost treasure. We're unraveling the very fabric of medieval power, where the clash between crown and cloister shaped history itself. So light your torch and follow close, the stones are about to speak. Long before monasteries became synonymous with hidden vaults, they were already fortresses of silence by design. The 6th century rule of Saint Benedict didn't just encourage quiet contemplation, it wove secrecy into the very fabric of monastic life. Benedict's famous dictum, "Let the oratory be what it is called, a place of prayer," carried an unspoken corollary: what happens within these walls stays within these walls. This wasn't merely about piety, it was survival. As Christianity spread across Europe, monasteries became targets. Pagan raiders sought their gold, rival bishops coveted their relics, and kings eyed their land. The monks' vow of silence became their first line of defense, a cultural shield that would eventually morph into something far more deliberate. But secrecy took on new urgency as political landscapes shifted. When Charlemagne's successors began consolidating power in the 8th and 9th centuries, monasteries found themselves caught between heaven and crown. Kings demanded loyalty oaths, taxes, and even control over abbots' appointments. For monks who answered to a higher authority, both divine and papal, this was untenable. Their solution, a shadow system of protection. The same scriptoriums that painstakingly copied scripture began producing double ledgers, one for royal inspectors, another for the abbey's eyes only. The wine cellars that stocked communion sacraments hid compartments for banned texts, and beneath the choir stalls, where voices rose in plainsong, hollow spaces swallowed whispered warnings of approaching tax collectors. The Relics crisis of the 10th century exposed just how high the stakes were. When Holy Roman Emperor Otto III demanded monasteries surrender fragments of the true cross to bolster his divine legitimacy, many abbots faced an impossible choice: defy their emperor or betray their sacred trusts. Some chose deception, creating ingenious forgeries, artfully aged splinters of ordinary wood. displayed with pomp while the genuine artifacts vanished into subterranean chapels. At Reichenau Abbey, chronicles hint at a second altar beneath the main church, accessible only by removing a specific floor tile near the baptismal font. These weren't acts of greed, but of sacred defiance, a belief that some truths were too fragile for the hands of kings. What's often overlooked is how monastic secrecy mirrored early Christian survival tactics. The catacombs of Rome had taught believers the art of concealment. The persecuted church hid its sacraments in plain sight, carving fish symbols onto ordinary-looking doors. Medieval monks simply adapted these strategies, using their architectural mastery to build deception into stone. The Cluniac reforms of the 11th century took it further, standardizing layouts that included blind corridors, passages leading nowhere to confuse intruders while the real treasures lay behind unmarked walls. This wasn't paranoia, it was institutional memory. Every time a Viking raid left a library in ashes or a king's envoy walked off with a monastery's charter, the lesson burned deeper. Survival depended on keeping secrets even from those who claimed to protect you. The tension between spiritual and temporal power reached its peak during the Investiture controversy of the 12th century, when popes and emperors clashed over who controlled church appointments. Monasteries became battlegrounds, their loyalty constantly scrutinized. At Monte Cassino, monks reportedly bricked up an entire archive behind a fresco of the Last Judgment, its location known only to the abbot and his chosen successor. The symbolism was deliberate. The final reckoning would decide when, or if, those secrets resurfaced. Such measures reveal a chilling truth. For medieval monks, secrecy wasn't just practical. It was sacramental. To hide something wasn't to hoard it, but to consecrate it, to place it beyond the reach of human corruption until God's kingdom made all things safe again. If you walked through a medieval monastery, you'd never guess the walls around you were whispering with secrets. The true genius of these spaces wasn't just in their grandeur, it was in their deception. Take the floor tiles of Clairvaux Abbey, for example. At first glance, they formed a simple geometric pattern, but step on the right sequence, and a section of the floor would pivot, revealing a staircase spiraling into darkness. Builders didn't just construct these monasteries, they engineered puzzles in stone. One of their most cunning tricks was misdirection. While royal inspectors might scrutinize the treasury or scriptorium, the real treasures often lay beneath their feet. At Mont Saint-Michel, the abbey's thick supporting columns weren't just structural, they were hollow, hiding narrow shafts that led to hidden chapels where forbidden manuscripts were stored. The pillars themselves were placed at deliberate angles, creating blind spots that concealed doorways when viewed from certain vantage points. Even the lighting played a role. Stained glass windows were positioned to cast shadows that disguised irregularities in the walls, making seams between movable stones nearly invisible in the shifting light of day. Then there were the tunnels, not the romanticized, spacious passages of legend, but claustrophobic crawl spaces designed to deter the uninvited. In the Alpine monastery of Einsiedeln, archaeologists found a corridor so tight that entering required lying flat and pushing forward with one's toes, arms pinned to the sides. At the end, a chamber just large enough to sit upright, its walls lined with niches holding wax-sealed jars, likely once filled with medicinal herbs or volatile inks that monks didn't want confiscated. These weren't just hiding places, they were tests of commitment. But the bell towers, those soaring symbols of faith, were the ultimate sleight of hand. Their immense height served a dual purpose. While they called the faithful to prayer, their foundations often concealed the most secure vaults. At Durham Cathedral, the tower's massive weight required deep stone footings, which builders cleverly expanded into hidden chambers accessible only from the sacristy. The daily ringing of bells provided acoustic cover, masking the sounds of movement below, and because towers were considered sacred spaces, few dared to scrutinize them too closely, making them the perfect psychological shield. What's remarkable is how these designs evolved over centuries. Early hidden rooms were crude, but by the Gothic period, monks had refined their techniques to near artistry. Westminster Abbey's chapter house features a vaulted ceiling with keystones that, when pressed in a specific order, release a section of the wall. At Melk Abbey in Austria, a seemingly decorative maze carved into a cloister bench actually serves as a cipher. Aligning its grooves correctly reveals the mechanism to open a subterranean passage. These weren't just functional solutions, they were declarations of defiance woven into the very fabric of sacred architecture. The precision of these systems speaks volumes. At Canterbury, masons left behind a set of architectural plans with cryptic marginal notes. Modern scholars believe their instructions for maintaining hidden mechanisms, written in a coded blend of Latin and Old English. This level of coordination hints at a silent network of builders and monks working across Europe, sharing techniques through whispers and symbols, their legacy. Spaces that still guard their secrets today, proving that sometimes the best way to hide something is to build it in plain sight. Imagine holding a splinter of wood no bigger than a fingernail, yet kings were willing to wage wars to possess it. Such was the power of sacred relics in medieval Europe, objects believed to carry divine energy capable of healing the sick, guaranteeing victory in battle, or even legitimizing a ruler's claim to the throne. Monks didn't just safeguard these relics, they became custodians of a dangerous currency, one that could uplift or unravel kingdoms with a single revelation. The most sought-after relics were fragments of the true cross, thorns from Christ's crown, or bones of apostles like Peter and Paul. But here's the twist: by the 12th century, there were enough alleged pieces of the true cross in circulation to build a small ship. Monasteries faced a dilemma: refuse a king's demand for a relic and risk retaliation, or part with a sacred treasure and lose their spiritual prestige. Their solution: a thriving underground market of ingenious replicas. At Fécamp Abbey in Normandy, monks crafted miraculous duplicates by rubbing ordinary wood against their genuine fragment, then declaring the copy divinely imbued through contact. Other abbeys used pig bones as stand-ins for saintly remains, knowing royal envoys wouldn't dare scrutinize holy artifacts too closely. Yet some relics were too potent to fake. The blood of Saint Januarius, kept at Montevergin Abbey, was said to liquefy on command, a phenomenon no counterfeit could replicate. Such treasures were hidden in plain sight. The monks of Conques Abbey built their entire church around the relics of Saint Foy, embedding her golden statue into the altar itself. But beneath that altar lay a second, secret compartment accessible only by removing a seemingly decorative keystone. Inside rested the saint's actual skull, wrapped in silk inscribed with warnings in a cipher only the abbot could read. The political stakes were staggering. When King Philip Augustus of France seized the relic-rich abbey of Saint Denis in the 13th century, he didn't just take gold. He displayed the abbey's relics in Paris to prove God favored his rule. Monks elsewhere learned the lesson. Relics weren't just spiritual anchors, they were bargaining chips in a game of thrones. At Canterbury, a hidden ledger from the 14th century reveals how monks catalogued their relics in code, marking which ones were shown versus kept, a clandestine inventory system to track what royals had seen versus what truly existed. But the greatest secret of all, some relics were considered too volatile to ever reveal. The monks of Clunney whispered of a vial containing the breath of Gabriel, sealed in a lead casket beneath the bell tower. To open it, their chronicles claimed, would unleash a wind to scatter empires. Whether myth or reality, such legends underscore why these objects were buried rather than displayed. In a world where faith moved armies, monks understood something kings did not: that true power wasn't in possessing divine relics, but in controlling who believed you did. Beneath the candlelit scriptoriums where monks copied psalms and gospels, another kind of writing was happening, one that could get a man burned at the stake. While official histories portray monasteries as obedient scribes of church-sanctioned texts, many monks risked their lives to preserve ideas that threatened the very foundations of medieval power. Their secret vaults became time capsules for forbidden knowledge, from pagan philosophies that predated Christianity to scientific treatises that contradicted biblical teachings. Consider the case of the Archimedes palimpsest, a prayer book later revealed to have been scrubbed clean of its original contents, advanced mathematical theories by the ancient Greek genius. Somewhere in the 10th century, a monk carefully scraped away Archimedes' calculations to reuse the parchment for hymns. But why destroy such valuable knowledge? Because mathematics in the wrong hands was seen as dangerous. Rulers feared that geometry could be used to build siege engines, or that astronomy might challenge the Church's Earth-centric universe. The act of erasure wasn't just practical recycling, it was ideological censorship. Yet intriguingly, not all banned texts met this fate. Recent multispectral imaging has uncovered traces of the original writing beneath the hymns, suggesting some monks may have deliberately preserved condemned knowledge in disguised forms. Then there were the alternative Gospels texts like the Gospel of Thomas or the Apocryphon of John, which presented radically different versions of Christ's teachings. Unlike the canonical Bible, these works spoke of secret revelations, feminine divine figures, and a God who transcended human gender. When church authorities ordered them destroyed in the 4th century, some monastic communities refused. At Nag Hammadi in Egypt, monks buried an entire library of these forbidden texts in sealed jars, where they lay hidden until a farmer accidentally unearthed them in 1945. The survival of these manuscripts reveals a startling truth. Medieval monasteries weren't just fortresses of orthodoxy, they were also secret archives for suppressed spiritual visions. Scientific heresy posed an even greater threat. When the works of ancient physicians like Galen or Arab scholars like Avicenna entered Europe, their ideas about anatomy and disease often clashed with church doctrine. A 12th century manuscript from Monte Cassino describes monks dissecting animal corpses by moonlight to test these theories, recording their findings in cipher. One marginal note warns, "Let not the bishop's men see this, lest they call it witchcraft." The real danger wasn't just theological, it was political. Kings relied on the church to control medical knowledge, using the threat of damnation to suppress competing healers. By preserving these texts, monks weren't just saving ideas, they were undermining royal authority over life and death itself. Perhaps the most explosive secrets were the political ones. Monasteries often served as unofficial record keepers for royal scandals, illegitimate births, poisoned rivals, bribed elections. The Chronicles of St. Albans Abbey in England contain coded passages about King John's alleged plot to murder his nephew Arthur, while a hidden ledger from Clunney lists payments to silence witnesses to a French queen's affair. These weren't idle gossip, they were insurance policies. By documenting royal crimes, monks created leverage against monarchs who might otherwise seize their lands or relics. The vaults beneath their bell towers became blackmail archives, where truth was preserved as both sacred duty and survival tactic. The cost of this knowledge was steep. In 1320, 4 monks at the Abbey of Saint Victor in Marseille were executed for possessing a prophecy about the downfall of the Capetian dynasty. Their trial records reveal they'd hidden the document inside a hollowed-out crucifix, recopying it every decade to prevent deterioration. Their fate underscores why these texts were buried rather than read, because in a world where kings ruled by divine right, forbidden knowledge wasn't just dangerous. It was revolutionary. The monasteries of medieval Europe weren't just spiritual sanctuaries, they were economic powerhouses operating in the shadows. While monks took vows of poverty, their institutions grew staggeringly rich through a web of landholdings, skilled craftsmanship, and strategic trade. A single abbey like Clunney in its prime controlled over 10,000 dependent properties, from vineyards to salt mines, generating wealth that rivaled small kingdoms. But this prosperity came with a target on their backs. Kings, perpetually short on funds for wars and palaces, saw monasteries as glorified treasure chests waiting to be cracked open. To shield their assets, monks became masters of financial deception. Double ledger accounting was just the beginning. At Fountains Abbey in England, excavators found hollowed-out floor tiles containing thin sheets of vellum, miniature ledgers listing hidden income from wool exports that never appeared in official records. Other abbeys used coded symbols in their account books, marking certain transactions with tiny crosses or fish drawings to indicate which sums were real and which were decoys for royal tax collectors. The most ingenious trick, loan records buried in reliquaries. When inspectors demanded to see financial documents, monks would present a saint's bone case, never realizing the hollow base beneath the relic concealed loan contracts with powerful nobles, written in disappearing ink made from oak gall and vinegar. The physical hiding spots for wealth were equally clever. While kings might search cellar storerooms, they rarely thought to check inside the monastery's very walls. At Melk Abbey, restorers discovered that certain decorative stone rosettes in the cloister were actually removable, revealing narrow cavities stuffed with Byzantine gold coins wrapped in linen. Elsewhere, wealth was hidden in plain sight: altar candlesticks crafted with weighted bases that unscrewed to hide gems, or processional crosses with hollow arms containing rolled-up promissory notes. The bell towers played their part too. Their massive foundation stones often concealed iron strongboxes, the ringing bells masking the sound of coins being counted below. But the most explosive secrets weren't the treasures themselves, it was what they represented. Monasteries frequently acted as shadow bankers, offering discreet loans to nobles and even kings at interest rates that would have scandalized the church if made public. A fragmentary ledger from Canterbury Cathedral's hidden vault details loans to 3 Plantagenet kings, with collateral including royal crowns and fragments of the true cross. These transactions blurred the line between sacred and secular power, proving that even monarchs knelt before the economic might of the cloister when their coffers ran dry. The stakes of this financial secrecy became brutally clear during the Albigensian Crusade in the 13th century. When French King Philip Roman II demanded Cistercian abbeys fund his campaign against heretics, the monks of Fontfroid Abbey allegedly melted down their silver liturgical vessels and recast them as plain tin, while secretly shipping the real silver to Catalan merchants in exchange for letters of credit redeemable abroad. Their deception was discovered only when a disgruntled lay brother betrayed them, leading to the abbot's imprisonment. Such incidents reveal the dangerous game monks played. Preserving their wealth wasn't greed but survival. In an era when a king could dissolve a monastery overnight, those hidden ledgers and subterranean strongrooms were more than accounting tricks. They were insurance policies written in gold and parchment, ensuring the church's endurance against the whims of earthly power. Bell towers stood as silent sentinels of monastic secrecy, their hollow interiors echoing with more than just hymns. The thick limestone walls that amplified sacred chants also absorbed incriminating sounds, creating perfect acoustic shields for activities meant to stay hidden. At Vézelay Abbey in France, the bell tower's foundation housed a narrow spiral staircase that doubled as a secret passage. Each step was deliberately uneven, a tripping hazard for unfamiliar visitors but a tactile guide for monks navigating in darkness. When royal inspectors came calling, precious manuscripts could vanish into these shadowed stairwells within minutes, tucked behind stones numbered with nearly invisible chalk marks. Height played its own strategic role. From their perch atop towers, monks could spot dust clouds from approaching horsemen long before royal heralds sounded their trumpets. The bell ringers of Durham Cathedral kept a coded flag system. Different colored cloths draped over the tower's edge warned of specific threats: red for tax collectors, black for armed retinues, white for papal legates. This early warning system bought critical time to conceal contraband. Beneath the tower's floorboards, archaeologists later found hollowed-out spaces just large enough to stash ledger books or relic caskets, their lids disguised as ordinary floor tiles when covered with straw matting. But the true brilliance lay in how monks weaponized the bells themselves. The deafening peals that marked canonical hours served as auditory smokescreens. During the loudest sequences, like the Gloria bells signaling Easter Mass, monks would move restricted items between hiding places. At Mont Saint-Michel, account books described teams of novices assigned to the Great Noise duty, synchronizing bell strikes with the transport of gold from the treasury to a tidal cave beneath the abbey. The sound wasn't just camouflage, it was psychological manipulation. Visitors instinctively covered their ears during peals, their diverted attention creating blind spots for covert activities. Some towers hid secrets in their very construction. The bell tower of San Miniato al Monte in Florence contains a hollow column that channels rainwater from the roof, a seemingly practical feature until restorers discovered its base opened into a sealed chamber. Inside were 12th century tools for minting coins, suggesting monks had operated an unauthorized currency workshop under the guise of architectural runoff. Similarly, the Leaning Tower of Pisa's cathedral once had a counterweight mechanism in its upper levels officially to stabilize the structure, but monastery records hint it also powered a hidden lift to raise supplies away from prying eyes. Perhaps most remarkably, these towers became living encryption devices. The complex sequences of bell tones known as change ringing functioned as mnemonic codes. At Whitby Abbey, specific peal patterns signaled which hidden vaults were compromised and needed evacuation. A 19th century restoration uncovered grooves carved into the tower's wooden beams, matching the swing patterns of bells that corresponded to numbered hiding places below. The system was so effective that even if outsiders learned part of the code, the ever-changing permutations kept the full meaning elusive. These soaring stone giants embodied a paradox. The same structures that called communities to spiritual transparency also facilitated history's most enduring acts of holy deception. Their shadows stretched far beyond the monastery walls, not just marking the hours, but guarding the secrets that ticked away within them. Royal inspections were less about piety and more about power, a high-stakes performance where every gesture could betray a secret. When King Henry II's agents arrived at Glastonbury Abbey in the 12th century, they expected obedience. Instead, they were greeted by monks who had rehearsed their roles for weeks. The cellarer accidentally spilled wine on the inspection scrolls, rendering them illegible. The abbot's secretary feigned a fainting spell to delay access to the treasury. Even the monastery's dogs played their part, trained to bark incessantly near decoy hiding spots, while the real treasures sat undisturbed beneath the infirmary floor. This wasn't chaos, it was choreographed deception. The inspectors themselves were often caught in the middle, charged with rooting out hidden wealth. Many were former monks who knew the tricks firsthand. At Clunney, a visiting official himself, once a Benedictine, noticed the fresco in the chapter house seemed slightly off-center. Behind it lay a door, but not the one he expected. The monks had anticipated his scrutiny and constructed a false compartment containing nothing but a single rusted key and a mocking note in Latin, "Seek and ye shall find." Nothing. The real vault was accessed through a drain in the kitchen garden, its entrance obscured by a tangle of deliberately overgrown herbs. Some abbeys turned inspections into psychological warfare. At St. Gall in Switzerland, monks would guide royal envoys through a labyrinth of identical corridors, subtly disorienting them before unveiling a meticulously staged treasury, a room filled with dusty chests that, when opened, contained only pebbles and worn-out sandals. The message was clear: we have nothing to hide because you'll never find what we've hidden. Meanwhile, the abbey's actual riches rested behind a movable statue of St. Gallus, its base rigged to sink slightly under the weight of a disguised counterweight system. The most ingenious defenses exploited royal superstitions. When inspectors demanded to see the crypt at Reichenau Abbey, monks warned that the last man who entered uninvited died within a year. They even produced a cursed ledger naming 3 previous victims, all fabricated. The ruse worked so well that the crypt remained untouched for decades, its authentic relics and financial records safe behind a wall painted with ominous symbols. Other monasteries used architecture as a weapon: narrow staircases designed to make inspectors claustrophobic, or hidden air vents that emitted eerie whistles when certain doors were opened, reinforcing rumors of haunted vaults. Yet the greatest deception wasn't in the hiding places, but in the paperwork. Monks mastered the art of the plausible lie: inventories listing chalices as modest tin when they were solid silver, or describing gem-encrusted reliquaries as simple wooden boxes. At Canterbury, a scribe's marginal doodle of a fish later proved to be a cipher key, revealing that the abbey's annual deficit was actually a coded surplus. These documents weren't just false records, they were narratives crafted to survive scrutiny, their very banality making them believable. When all else failed, monasteries played their ultimate card: divine wrath. The abbot of Corvey allegedly brandished a letter from St. Peter, threatening eternal damnation on anyone who seized monastic property. Whether the inspectors believed it hardly mattered. The theatricality alone gave them plausible deniability to report back that nothing amiss was found. In the end, these cat-and-mouse games weren't just about protecting gold or manuscripts. They were about preserving a fragile autonomy in a world where kings saw monasteries not as sacred spaces, but as vaults waiting to be cracked. Clunney Abbey wasn't just a religious center. It was a labyrinth of secrets buried beneath its grand door. Rumors swirled for centuries about its hidden tunnels, but few expected the truth uncovered in 1988. During renovations, workers stumbled upon a narrow passage beneath the abbey's infirmary, its walls lined with tiny alcoves just large enough to hold a single book. These weren't ordinary storage nooks, they were designed for rapid concealment. Each alcove had a unique marking, a carved symbol matching those in the abbey's library catalogue, suggesting monks could relocate entire sections of forbidden texts in minutes if inspectors arrived. The most startling discovery, a hollowed-out column in the scriptorium, its interior blackened by candle soot, proof that generations of scribes had worked here by clandestine light to copy banned manuscripts under the noses of authorities. Whitby Abbey's secrets were literally written in the walls. When archaeologists examined its storm-damaged foundations in 2003, they found runes scratched into the stone, not the usual Christian inscriptions, but Norse symbols referencing silver under the tide's turn. Local folklore had long claimed the monks hid Viking plunder after a raid in the 8th century, but the runes confirmed it. Beneath the high altar's remains lay a waterlogged chamber accessible only during low tide, its entrance camouflaged by a thin layer of mortar mixed with crushed seashells. Inside were fragments of a chest and a single silver ingot stamped with King Aila's mark, evidence the monks had indeed intercepted Danegeld meant to buy off Viking invaders. The real mystery why they kept it. Some scholars believe the silver was ransom for captured brethren. Others think the monks saw it as blood money too cursed to spend. Melk Abbey's forgotten vault became legend for a reason. In 1722, a novice accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism while polishing a statue of Saint Columbin. A section of the cloister floor slid open, revealing steps descending into darkness, but before anyone could explore, the door sealed shut and refused to reopen. Contemporary accounts describe frantic searches for the trigger, even consultations with the original architect's ghostly writings. The vault's location remained lost until 2011, when ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly beneath the Abbey's wine cellar. Behind a false wall lay a small chamber containing three things: a decayed ledger listing payments to Hungarian mercenaries, a sapphire-encrusted reliquary empty of its supposed saint's tooth, and, most intriguing, a wax-sealed papal bull declaring the abbey exempt from imperial taxes. The discovery explained why Melk's monks went to such lengths to hide it. The document undermined the Holy Roman Emperor's authority, making its possession treasonous. These monasteries shared a common tactic, using sacred spaces as psychological shields. At Monte Cassino in Italy, the Cave of the Angels beneath the basilica wasn't just a crypt. Its walls were painted with frescoes of watchful seraphim, a deliberate deterrent against looters who feared divine retribution. Similarly, the monks of Sants Cruz in Spain embedded shards of glass and iron nails into the mortar around their hidden treasury, spreading rumors the vault was cursed by Moorish sorcery. The most brazen deception might be at Pannonhalma Archabbey in Hungary, where monks disguised an entire underground library as a burial catacomb, complete with fake skeletons posed as if reading at stone desks. When Ottoman inspectors demanded entry in the 16th century, the sight of studious corpses supposedly made them retreat without inspecting the bookshelves concealed behind the macabre scene. What makes these sites remarkable isn't just their ingenuity, but their adaptability. Each monastery tailored its secrets to local threats: Clunney's book tunnels for intellectual suppression, Whitby's tidal chamber for coastal raids, Melk's tax-proof vault for imperial overreach. Their vaults weren't static hiding places. They evolved alongside the dangers, turning monasteries into living fortresses of defiance. The real treasure they guarded wasn't gold or manuscripts, but something far more precious: the right to exist on their own terms. Walking through the cloisters of a medieval monastery, you might not notice the odd carving on a capital or the faint scratch marks near a window ledge, but to a monk 800 years ago, these were clear signposts pointing to secrets. The cipher system these monks developed wasn't written in ink, but etched into the very stones around them. Take the twisted columns of Sant'Ambrogio Basilica in Milan. At first glance, their spiral design seems purely decorative until you realize the number of turns corresponds to steps in a nearby corridor. Follow the twists, and they lead you to a loose floorstone hiding a cavity filled with 12th century medical scrolls, their margins crammed with Arabic herbal remedies the church had banned. Some symbols were insider jokes disguised as piety. At Mont Saint Michel, a fresco of Saint Michael slaying the dragon contains a peculiar detail: the demon's tail curls into the exact shape of a keyhole. For centuries, pilgrims admired the artwork without realizing it doubled as a map. Pressing a finger into the keyhole depression releases a hidden catch in the adjacent choir stall, revealing a compartment once used to store encrypted letters between Norman and Breton monks during English invasions. The brilliance lay in the dual meaning: pious imagery for outsiders, practical wayfinding for those in the know. Then there were the outright puzzles. The Cistercians of Fountains Abbey left behind a carved stone panel showing 7 fish swimming in a circle, a seemingly innocent biblical reference. But when 19th century restorers noticed the fish scales were unevenly spaced, they discovered the pattern matched a rotating cipher disk. Aligning the largest scales with specific Latin phrases from the Abbey's hymnal unlocked instructions for locating their emergency grain stores, under the third eye of the east-facing watcher. This turned out to be a statue of the Virgin Mary whose eyes were actually holes allowing monks to monitor secret grain transfers at night. Decoding these symbols today is like playing chess against ghosts. At Klosterneuburg Abbey near Vienna, a series of numbered fleur-de-lis carvings baffled historians until someone noticed they aligned with lunar phases. During certain moon cycles, shadows from the cloister arches would illuminate specific numbers in sequence, a 3, 7, 9, which corresponded to pages in the Abbey's chronicle detailing hidden relic transactions. The system was so precise that modern attempts to replicate it fail unless performed on the exact date and hour the original monks intended. Perhaps the most haunting marks are those left in desperation. During the Reformation, Augustinian monks in Erfurt scrambled to hide their library as Protestant mobs approached. In their rush, they scratched tiny arrows into the mortar between bricks, leading downward to a sealed crypt. These weren't elegant ciphers, but frantic dashes made with belt buckles and nails, yet they worked. The arrows went unnoticed for 450 years until a librarian tripped on uneven flooring and noticed the pattern. Beneath lay one of the most pristine medieval manuscript caches ever found, its parchment wrapped in waxed cloth and sealed with the Abbey's secret stamp, a dove holding not an olive branch but a key. What makes these symbols extraordinary isn't just their cleverness but their humanity. Every twisted column and numbered fish was a silent plea, a message cast into the future, hoping someone worthy would understand. They remind us that secrecy wasn't just about protection. It was an act of faith that truth, however buried, would one day resurface. The ingenuity of medieval monks extended far beyond spiritual devotion. It reached into the very bones of the earth. To construct vaults that would evade detection for centuries, these builders became masters of deception, blending sacred architecture with the cunning of military engineers. At Relics Abbey in England, they didn't just dig chambers, they exploited the landscape itself. The Abbey's location in a steep valley allowed monks to tunnel horizontally into existing sandstone cliffs, creating storage spaces that appeared from the outside as natural rock formations. The real brilliance lay in the ventilation. Narrow shafts disguised as rainwater drains snaked upward through chimneys, ensuring fresh air without revealing the caverns below. But the true marvels were the mechanical seals. Some entrances used counterweighted stones so precisely balanced that a child could open them if they knew where to press. At Alcobaça Monastery in Portugal, a seemingly solid wall in the refectory pivoted when specific tiles near the abbot's seat were tapped in sequence. The mechanism relied on Roman-era knowledge of levers and pulleys repurposed for secrecy. Even the sound was engineered. The stones moved silently thanks to wool pads soaked in olive oil, a trick borrowed from cathedral door hinges. Water became both ally and disguise. The Cistercians of Fontenay Abbey diverted an underground stream to mask the sound of movement in their vaults, while also using its flow to power a hidden mill for coin minting. Elsewhere, monks constructed drowning chambers, flooded tunnels that could be drained via sluice gates when access was needed. A 13th century sketch from Clairvaux shows how they calculated water levels to keep treasures dry while deterring intruders with the threat of sudden flooding. The reuse of older structures added another layer of camouflage. When Benedictines took over the Roman ruins of Glastonbury Abbey, they incorporated existing subterranean passages into their design. One such tunnel, originally part of a hypocaust heating system, became a secret route to a relic vault. The genius was in the details. Roman bricks were carefully replicated to patch new sections, making the modifications indistinguishable from ancient work. Even the mortar matched thanks to crushed local shells mixed into the lime. Perhaps the most sophisticated trick was psychological. Builders incorporated blind architectural features, fake buttresses, non-functional staircases, or decorative arches that suggested structural necessity while concealing storage behind them. At Canterbury Cathedral, a seemingly load-bearing column in the crypt actually supported nothing. Its sole purpose was to hide a spiral staircase descending to a chamber lined with lead for storing volatile chemicals. The column's ornate carvings weren't just decoration, they distracted from faint seam lines where the stone could be rotated. These weren't haphazard hiding spots but systems designed for permanence. The vaults at Vézelay Abbey employed a self-stabilizing arch design that shifted weight outward as soil settled, actually strengthening over time. Meanwhile, Cistercian masons developed a form of concrete using volcanic ash that set underwater perfect for chambers hidden beneath baptismal fonts. The materials themselves were chosen for deception. Iron fittings were coated with beeswax to prevent telltale rust stains, while wooden beams were deliberately aged with vinegar-soaked cloth to match surrounding structures. The ultimate testament to their success, many of these vaults functioned exactly as intended, remaining hidden for half a millennium or more. When excavators finally uncovered some, they found mechanisms still operational. At Poblet Monastery in Spain, a 2-ton counterweight door opened smoothly in 2013, last touched by human hands before Columbus sailed to the Americas. That enduring functionality speaks to something beyond engineering, a worldview that treated secrecy as sacred and craftsmanship as an act of devotion. History rarely speaks in full sentences, especially when it comes to the secrets monks took pains to bury, but occasionally a whisper slips through the cracks. Take the case of Brother Elias, a 12th century scribe at Canterbury Cathedral, whose chronicle contains a curious aside about a chamber of echoes beneath the south bell tower. He describes a space where whispered confessions would reverberate unnaturally, bouncing off walls, as if the stones themselves were repeating them. Modern acousticians confirmed this effect when they discovered a domed subchamber beneath the tower, its curved ceiling designed to amplify and distort sound. But here's what Elias didn't write. The same acoustics that carried prayers upward could also carry conversations horizontally. A monk speaking into a specific floor grate could be heard clearly in the abbot's private oratory 30 paces away, an early warning system disguised as divine phenomenon. Then there's the chilling confession of Brother Matteo, recorded during his trial for heresy in 13th century Leon. Stripped of his habit and facing the Inquisition, he described being led blindfolded to a vault where books burned the soul with their words. The transcript survives in a Vatican archive, its margins filled with nervous scribble notations. Matteo spoke of texts that made the air hum, and a silver chest that wept mercury when touched. While his testimony was dismissed as demonic ravings, modern scholars suspect he encountered early alchemical treatises, perhaps even the forbidden works of Jabir ibn Hayyan, whose mercury experiments were considered occult. The real mystery: the trial abruptly ends mid-page, suggesting someone powerful intervened to silence the revelations. Even royal archives contain veiled references. A 1392 decree from King Charles VI of France complains of monasteries hiding unlawful concealments in their bowels. The phrasing is deliberate. Medieval law required specificity in accusations, so this vague wording hints the king knew more than he dared state publicly. Cross-referencing with monastic expense records reveals a telling detail. That same year, the abbot of St. Denis purchased 20 ells of black felt and 3 barrels of quicklime. Felt was used to muffle sounds during construction, while quicklime could erase bloodstains or dissolve evidence. The implication is clear: someone was modifying hidden spaces in a hurry. Perhaps the most poignant account comes from an unlikely source, a laundress at Fontevraud Abbey. In a 1483 letter to her sister, preserved by sheer luck in a bookbinding, Jean de Laval describes seeing monks carry a chest that moaned into the bell tower at night. She writes of hearing a sound like 100 bees from beneath the infirmary floor, and of mysterious burns on the monks' robes that smelled not of fire but of lightning. For centuries, historians dismissed this as superstition until restorers found a hidden laboratory under the infirmary containing early electrical experiments with amber and cat fur. Jean's bees may have been static discharges from primitive Leyden jars. These fragments form a mosaic of intentional secrecy. When the abbot of Clunney wrote in his private journal of the place where even angels must knock 3 times, he wasn't being poetic. Archaeologists later found his place a vault behind the high altar with a door that only opened after 3 specific stones were pressed in sequence. Each account, no matter how embellished, contains a kernel of truth. That monastic secrecy wasn't just about hiding things, but about controlling who got to witness the act of concealment itself. The real power lay in the knowing, and being certain others did not. When the Reformation storm broke over Europe in the 16th century, monasteries found themselves caught in a tempest of iconoclasm and political vengeance. Protestant reformers didn't just challenge church doctrine, they saw monastic wealth as a corruption to be purged, their vaults as troves of idolatry. For monks who'd spent centuries perfecting the art of concealment, this was no longer a game of cat and mouse with kings. It was a desperate scramble to save their legacy from annihilation. Some chose defiance to the bitter end. At Relics Abbey in England, Cistercian monks bricked up their relic vaults with mortar mixed with crushed glass, ensuring anyone who tried to break through would leave bloodied hands as evidence. They then scattered iron nails across the floor not to damage boots, but to create telltale scraping sounds if looters returned at night. Others turned to misdirection. The Benedictines of Melk Abbey, hearing of approaching reformers, staged an elaborate fake burial in their cemetery. Witnesses reported seeing monks inter a heavy chest, but ground-penetrating radar centuries later revealed the truth. The coffin was empty, a decoy to draw attention from the real cache hidden beneath the abbey's bakery, where heat from the ovens masked the scent of aged parchment and wax seals. Not all attempts succeeded. When Henry VIII's commissioners arrived at Glastonbury, Abbot Whiting made the fatal mistake of trusting his hiding places too well. He'd concealed the abbey's charters in a hollow altar, but the commissioners, tipped off by a disgruntled lay brother, dismantled every stone until they found them. Whiting's subsequent execution sent a chilling message. The old tricks wouldn't save them now. Elsewhere, looters got lucky. At Lindisfarne, reformers tore up floor tiles looking for silver and accidentally uncovered a tidal vault filled with Saxon gospel fragments. The manuscripts were tossed into bonfires, their illuminated pages melting into ash except for a handful secretly rescued by a local fisherman's daughter, who used them to patch a family's roof for generations before scholars recognized their value. Yet some vaults survived through sheer ingenuity. the Carthusians of London's Charterhouse, knowing their monastery was doomed, devised a last-ditch gambit. They transferred their most precious relics to a sympathetic goldsmith's workshop, then fabricated a convincing duplicate set using gilded wood and painted glass. When reformers stormed the Abbey, they proudly surrendered these fakes, while the real treasures traveled underground via a network of Catholic sympathizers, root cellars, and coal chutes. The scheme worked so well that 3 of the relics eventually resurfaced in a Belgian convent in the 19th century, still wrapped in their original lead cases inscribed with Charterhouse's seal. The Reformation's aftermath left a haunting legacy of empty spaces and unanswered questions. In Sweden, the dissolved Vadstena Abbey became a royal palace, but workers renovating the kitchens in 1722 broke through a wall into a sealed chapel. Inside, they found a single intact candle still burning in its sconce, its wax barely diminished. The impossible sight was later explained by trapped gases igniting from their disturbance, but locals swore it was the nuns' eternal vigil over whatever they'd hidden there before fleeing. Similarly, when Salzburg's St. Peter's Abbey was secularized, inspectors discovered a wine cellar with barrels dated 1520, the year Luther was excommunicated. Tapping one released not wine, but a cascade of gold ducats and a note in Latin. The vine of the Lord bears strange fruit. What makes this era so poignant is the duality of loss and resilience. For every vault plundered, like the infamous library cave at Forta Abbey, where reformers used manuscripts as kindling to burn statues, another slipped through the cracks. The Benedictines of Einsiedeln smuggled their prized Black Madonna statue into the Alps inside a hay cart, while the monks of St. Gall disguised their choir books as livestock tax records. These weren't just acts of preservation. They were quiet rebellions against the idea that history belongs only to the victors. The Reformation may have shattered monasticism's power, but the deepest secrets, those buried not just in stone but in cunning and faith, refused to die. The quiet hum of ground-penetrating radar across Fountains Abbey's ruins in 2018 didn't just map foundations, it unveiled a shadowy labyrinth defying all expectations. What archaeologists assumed were simple drainage channels turned out to be a meticulously engineered network of tunnels, some barely wide enough to crawl through. The real shock came when they discovered these passages weren't random. They formed precise geometric patterns aligning with celestial events. One tunnel pointed directly to where the summer solstice sun would have risen in the 13th century, suggesting the monks didn't just hide treasures here. They encoded astronomical knowledge into the very paths meant to conceal them. Half a continent away, a rainstorm in Portugal's Alcobaça monastery exposed secrets of a different kind. Workers clearing debris from a collapsed staircase found themselves staring into a chamber untouched since the 16th century. Beneath layers of dust lay 17 gold coins minted during the reign of King Manuel I, each one carefully notched along the edges. Historians later realized these marks corresponded to amounts in a long-lost ledger, evidence of a clandestine banking system where coins were literally tallied like primitive checks. But the true marvel was the decayed manuscript beside them. Though its pages crumbled at the touch, multispectral imaging revealed startling contents: a herbal remedy for the sweating sickness, a deadly Tudor-era plague, with ingredients matching New World plants decades before Columbus sailed. How did Portuguese monks know of American flora? The answer may lie in marginal sketches of caravels unlike any European design of the period. Germany's Lorsch Abbey delivered its own surprise during a routine restoration in 2021. When workers tapped what appeared to be a solid wall in the ancient pharmacy, the sound was suspiciously hollow. Behind the false facade lay a cache of medical texts so advanced they rewrote history. One parchment detailed a primitive form of germ theory, advising surgeons to wash hands and tools in wine boiled with garlic centuries before Semmelweis. Another contained color-coded diagrams of human anatomy accurate enough to suggest first-hand dissection, a practice strictly forbidden by medieval church doctrine. The most controversial find, a set of glass vials labeled in Arabic, their residue testing positive for early antibiotics derived from mold. These discoveries shattered assumptions about medieval medicine being purely superstitious, proving some monastic communities were quietly advancing science while publicly towing the church line. Not all modern revelations come from high-tech tools. At Spain's Santa Cruz Monastery, a clumsy tourist-dropped camera exposed a different kind of secret in 2019. The impact dislodged a loose floor tile, revealing a cavity filled with lead tokens stamped with Hebrew letters. Archaeologists initially assumed they were counterfeit coins until realizing each token matched a specific book in the Abbey's library, a clandestine lending system allowing Jewish scholars to study forbidden text. The tokens corresponded to shelf marks visible only under ultraviolet light, proving the monastery operated as a secret interfaith academy. This accidental find rewrote the narrative of medieval Christian-Jewish relations, showing cooperation where historians had assumed only conflict. Perhaps the most poignant discovery came from Switzerland's St. Gallen Abbey in 2022. Restorers working on the famous medieval library found peculiar wear patterns on certain floorboards. Removing them exposed a child-sized crawl space containing wax tablets practice exercises from a 9th century writing school, but these weren't just any student's work. The shaky handwriting and repeated corrections told a heartbreaking story. These were exercises by disabled or injured monks, their determination to contribute despite physical limitations preserved for 1200 years. One tablet bore the groove of a stylus dragged by someone with clearly limited hand control, yet the Latin psalm they painstakingly copied was flawless. These fragile wax rectangles revealed monastic life's hidden compassion, a far cry from the stereotype of medieval rigidity. The cumulative weight of these discoveries does more than fill history books, it reshapes our understanding of monastic secrecy. Each tunnel, token, and tattered manuscript proves these weren't just men hiding from kings or reformers. They were preservers of fragile knowledge, guardians of ideas too revolutionary or too tender for their time. The true treasure wasn't the gold or relics, but the proof that even in history's darkest corners, light found a way to endure. Beneath the ruins of Europe's monasteries, whispers of undiscovered treasures still taunt historians and adventurers alike. While some vaults have yielded their secrets, others cling to them with medieval stubbornness, their entrances lost to time or deliberately erased. Among the most tantalizing theories is that the Knights Templar, facing persecution in the 14th century, funneled part of their legendary wealth into monastic hiding places. The Templars had close ties to Cistercian monasteries. Both orders shared architectural expertise and a penchant for secrecy. At Rennes-le-Château in France, cryptic symbols in the church match those found in Templar strongholds, fueling speculation that knights and monks collaborated to hide relics like the fabled temple treasure of Jerusalem. Modern scans of the area reveal unnatural voids beneath the abbey, but no one's yet cracked the code to access them. Then there are the lost texts, works that could rewrite intellectual history. A 9th century catalogue from Reichenau Abbey lists a copy of Aristotle's Dialogues, a philosophical masterpiece referenced by ancient scholars but never found. The description matches fragments quoted in other medieval works, suggesting monks may have hidden it during Viking raids. Even more explosive are rumors of early Christian Gospels deemed too radical for the Bible. The monks of Mount Athos still guard a tradition that their founder buried a Book of Light beneath the monastery's oldest tower, a text supposedly containing Jesus' teachings on reincarnation. Whether myth or reality, the very possibility drives scholars to pore over monastic floor plans with ultraviolet scanners, searching for ink traces on stones that might mark concealed compartments. The ultimate prize for treasure hunters, the Ark of the Covenant, while most associate it with Ethiopia or Jerusalem, a persistent medieval legend claims it was smuggled to Europe by Templars and entrusted to monks for safekeeping. A 12th century chronicle from Clairvaux Abbey describes a golden chest that hums like bees, hidden beneath its chapel, a detail matching biblical accounts of the Ark's supernatural energy. Ground-penetrating radar recently detected a metallic anomaly in the described location, but church authorities have barred further investigation, citing the site's sanctity. What makes these hunts so compelling isn't just the potential riches, it's the layers of deception surrounding them. Medieval monks didn't just hide things, they wove labyrinths of misinformation. A map from Melk Abbey's archives appears to lead to a relic vault, but when followed precisely, it terminates at a dead-end wall. Only when researchers noticed the parchment glowed under infrared light did they spot faint arrows pointing downward, suggesting the real treasure lies beneath the false trail. Similarly, folk tales about cursed vaults often contain nuggets of truth. The Slovenian monastery of Stichna claims anyone who disturbs its sealed crypt will go mad, a story dismissed as superstition until tests revealed abnormally high mercury levels in the chamber's air, likely from medieval alchemical experiments preserved in the stagnant space. Technology has revolutionized the search, yet monks' ingenuity still outsmarts modern tools. At Montserrat in Spain, LiDAR scans identified a hidden chamber behind the Black Madonna's shrine, but its entrance responds only to specific Gregorian chants, a sonic lock keyed to frequencies that vibrate a concealed mechanism. Elsewhere, thermal imaging fails because monks mixed horsehair into mortar to diffuse heat signatures, rendering voids invisible to infrared. Even AI struggles to decode their ciphers. When researchers fed thousands of monastic symbols into an algorithm, it flagged patterns matching constellation maps, hinting that some vaults can only be found during certain celestial alignments. The enduring mystery of these lost treasures speaks to something deeper than gold or manuscripts. It's about the human instinct to preserve truth against all odds. Whether the Templars' hoard or Plato's lost dialogues lie waiting, each undiscovered vault represents a thread snipped from history's tapestry and the thrilling chance to weave it back in. Until then, the stones keep their counsel as they have for centuries. The moment a monastic vault is unsealed, we inherit the same dilemma its creators faced centuries ago: who gets to decide when a secret stops being sacred? Take the case of the recently uncovered Visoki Dechani treasury in Kosovo. When archaeologists breached a hidden chapel wall in 2019, they found a trove of 14th century Serbian Orthodox artifacts, jeweled crosses, illuminated psalters, even a royal crown. But the most contentious discovery was a sealed lead cylinder containing confessions from medieval monks, their sins written in such graphic detail that church officials immediately demanded the documents be reburied. Historians argued these were priceless social records. Descendants of the monks called it a violation of spiritual privacy. The standstill lasted 2 years before a compromise was reached. The cylinder was placed in a climate-controlled monastery vault, accessible only to senior clergy and scholars who signed strict ethical agreements. This tension between revelation and reverence isn't new. In 1588, Pope Sixtus V ordered the destruction of all copies of the Catalogue of Forbidden Books compiled by his predecessors, fearing it would expose church censorship tactics. Ironically, the only surviving copy was found in 1912, hidden beneath a Benedictine abbey's floor by monks who defied the order. Their act forces us to ask, were they preserving truth or committing disobedience? Modern archivists face similar quandaries. When X-rays revealed suppressed passages in the erased margins of Monte Cassino's rulebooks, details about monks fathering children and bribing officials, some argued publication would distort perceptions of medieval monasticism. Others countered that sanitizing history serves no one. The legal landscape further complicates matters. In 2016, a Bavarian court ruled that contents of Ettel Abbey's vaults belonged to the living descendants of donors who gifted treasures 7 centuries prior. The decision overturned centuries of monastic immunity traditions and set a precedent that now threatens to lock away thousands of artifacts in private collections. Meanwhile, in Spain, the opposite occurred. A judge granted public access to Poblet monasteries' hidden archives despite protests from the Cistercian order, declaring knowledge of the past is a human right. These conflicting verdicts reveal how modern law struggles to mediate between respect for the dead and the living's right to understand them. Perhaps the most nuanced perspective comes from conservation science. Advanced imaging now allows us to read sealed documents without breaking their wax seals or scan relic caskets without disturbing their contents. At Canterbury Cathedral, researchers using muon tomography, a particle physics technique, mapped a hidden chamber behind the martyr's shrine without removing a single stone. Such technology offers a middle path, satisfying both preservationists and scholars. But even this has limits. When Swiss scientists proposed digitally unwrapping a lead-sealed book from Einsiedeln Abbey, monks objected that the process would still violate the intention of the silence. Their stance reminds us that some secrets weren't just hidden. They were ritually interred, deserving the same respect as graves. The ethical lines blur further with cultural patrimony. Many monastic treasures originated as spoils of war or colonial conquest. The reliquary of St. Maurice at Magdeburg Cathedral, for instance, contains gems pillaged from Slavic tribes during the Wendish Crusade. Displaying it without context glorifies oppression, hiding it erases historical violence. Some museums now employ contextual concealment, showing such objects alongside accounts from the dispossessed. This approach acknowledges a painful truth. Sometimes revelation isn't about uncovering secrets, but exposing the systems that made secrecy necessary. What would the original monks think of our debates? Their own writings suggest they anticipated future discovery. At Clunney, a coded note wrapped around a banned manuscript read, "When the wolf becomes shepherd, open me." The phrase echoes through modern archaeology, not as permission to plunder, but as a challenge to weigh our motives. Are we uncovering secrets to enlighten or to exploit? To heal historical wounds or to sensationalize them? The stones may finally be speaking, but we're the ones who must decide how their truth should live in the light. Long after the last monk departed, the whispers remained stories passed through generations that turned stone and mortar into something alive with mystery. Take the so-called Weeping Crypt of Montserrat, where Spanish villagers swore they heard spectral chanting each winter solstice. Investigators in the 1800s dismissed it as wind through mountain crevices until they discovered a hidden ventilation shaft perfectly aligned to amplify voices from a sealed chapel below. The ghosts were just acoustics, but the truth behind the legend was even stranger. Monks had engineered their secret services to sound like the mountain itself was praying. Then there are the tales too chilling to dismiss as mere folklore. In the Scottish Highlands, locals avoided the ruins of Fearn Abbey for centuries, claiming anyone who slept near its broken walls would wake screaming of a book that bites. 19th century excavations revealed why. A lead-lined vault containing a medieval psalter with arsenic-laced pages, Whether meant to poison thieves or preserve parchment from insects, the effect was the same. Those who handled it without gloves developed blisters that matched teeth marks. The monks hadn't just hidden knowledge, they'd weaponized it. Ireland's self-ringing bell tower at Clonmacnoise Abbey has a more benevolent legend. Fishermen on the River Shannon reported hearing its peals during storms, even though the tower had been bell-less for 300 years. Modern historians traced this to a clever failsafe. Monks had rigged a hidden clapper to swing when floodwaters reached a certain level, warning nearby villages of coming danger. The mechanism rusted away long ago, but the story persists as a testament to how monastic ingenuity blurred into miracle in the popular imagination. Not all myths are so easily explained. The Black Catalogue of Melk Abbey allegedly drives readers mad with its contents, a claim treated as superstition until 1984, when a musicologist studying its cipher collapsed mid-lecture, babbling about the wrong saint. He'd uncovered musical notation hidden in the margins that, when played, produced dissonant chords at frequencies known to induce anxiety. Was this accidental acoustics or intentional psychological warfare? The manuscript remains locked in a Vienna archive, its full contents still debated. These stories share a common thread. They transform practical secrecy into something supernatural. A vault's cursed reputation might stem from clever traps like quicklime dust that burns intruders' lungs, while ghostly monks could be shadows cast by precisely placed candle holders. Yet their persistence reveals a deeper truth. Medieval monasteries didn't just hide physical objects, they cultivated an aura of sacred danger, ensuring that even when their walls crumbled, fear would stand guard over their secrets. The most poignant legends aren't about curses but unfinished duties. In Bohemia, villagers still leave offerings at the ruined chapel of Sedlec. Convinced skeletal monks appear at midnight to continue copying a book they couldn't finish before the Hussite Wars. Archaeology confirms this tale's roots. The Abbey's scriptorium was indeed burned mid-project, its charred desks holding the remains of quills and inkpots fused to bone. Here, folklore doesn't distort history. It preserves the human cost of knowledge interrupted. What makes these myths endure isn't their fantastical elements, but the kernels of truth they guard like relics. Every self-ringing bell and cursed manuscript whispers of a reality more astonishing than fiction. That centuries ago, monks wielded architecture, acoustics, and psychology with such mastery that their defenses still echo through time. The stones may have surrendered their secrets, but the stories remind us that some mysteries were never meant to be fully solved. The hunt for hidden monastic vaults has entered a new era where cutting-edge technology meets centuries-old craftsmanship. Ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic pulses through stone, revealing voids as small as a wine cask beneath Abbey floors, like the scan that uncovered a network of tunnels under York Minster in 2019, their precise curves betraying human design rather than natural cracks. But the real game-changer has been LiDAR, which strips away vegetation and surface clutter to expose subtle ground depressions. In Portugal's Alcobaça Monastery, this laser technology detected an unnatural rectangular shadow beneath the herb garden, leading archaeologists to a cellar filled with 14th century accounting sticks, medieval tax records the monks buried rather than surrender to royal auditors. Thermal imaging cameras peer through time itself by capturing temperature variations in stone. At Maulbronn Abbey in Germany, an infrared scan showed one cloister wall radiating slightly more heat than others, a clue that led to the discovery of hollow channels behind the masonry. These weren't structural flaws but ventilation shafts for a scriptorium hidden within the walls, where parchment fragments still bore traces of candle soot from clandestine nighttime copying. Even sound waves have become tools. Acoustic tomography maps density differences by measuring how quickly vibrations travel through materials. When researchers tapped the floor of Burgos Cathedral's bell tower with calibrated mallets, the echoes revealed a spiral staircase sealed behind what appeared to be solid rock, its steps worn smooth by generations of monks carrying forbidden texts to safety. Three-dimensional modeling has revolutionized excavation ethics, allowing archaeologists to enter hidden spaces digitally before lifting a single stone. After radar detected anomalies beneath Fountain's Abbey's infirmary, specialists created a VR reconstruction of the chamber, revealing shelving designed specifically for scroll storage and a drainage system to control humidity. This virtual approach preserves fragile sites. At Clunney, where unstable rubble makes physical excavation dangerous, drones with multispectral cameras built a map of underground passages that haven't been seen since the French Revolution. Artificial intelligence now tackles the monks' own encryption methods. A team at Cambridge trained machine learning algorithms to recognize patterns in seemingly random marginal doodles from medieval manuscripts. The AI flagged recurring symbols of fish with 4 fins, a crossed circle, that matched architectural features at 7 different abbeys. At one in Normandy, pressing stones marked with these symbols in sequence released a hidden door near the sacristy. Other AI projects analyze ink compositions to trace banned texts. The chemical fingerprint of a particular iron gall ink variant led researchers to identify 16 heretical pages secretly bound into Orthodox prayer books across Europe. Yet for all our technological prowess, some secrets still defy detection. The monks anticipated future tools with ingenious countermeasures, mixing horsehair into mortar to confuse radar, building vaults along natural fault lines to mask their edges in seismic scans. At Pannonhalma Archabbey in Hungary, restorers discovered lead sheets embedded in walls to block thermal imaging, while subterranean streams at Heiligenkreuz in Austria still drown out acoustic probes with their murmur. These obstacles remind us that technology alone can't replace historical insight. The real key lies in combining laser scans with parchment clues, algorithms with paleography, science with the patience to listen to what the stones have been whispering all along. History is littered with the wreckage of too good to be true discoveries, elaborate theatrical productions designed to exploit humanity's hunger for hidden treasures. One of the most audacious scams unfolded in 1843, when a French antiquarian unveiled what he claimed was the long-lost diary of Brother Thibault, a 12th century monk from Clunney. The crumbling manuscript described a secret chamber beneath the abbey's granary, filled with chests of Templar gold and heretical texts. Investors flocked to fund the excavation, lured by sketches of a vault ceiling painted with constellations matching the night sky from the year 1165. The diggers broke through to a cavernous space right on schedule, only to find 6 ornate chests coated in centuries of dust. The moment they were opened, the illusion shattered. Instead of glittering coins, the containers held nothing but bricks wrapped in moth-eaten cloth, their interiors deliberately aged with vinegar and iron filings to simulate decay. The Constellation ceiling, a clever fresco painted just months earlier using medieval pigment recipes lifted from an art history book. Across the Channel, an even bolder scheme targeted Westminster Abbey in 1897. A retired architect named Edgar Holloway produced what appeared to be 14th century blueprints showing a network of tunnels radiating from the Abbey's chapter house. His drawings were masterful forgeries, complete with period-accurate ink stains and wormholes artfully burned into the parchment with a hot needle. Holloway's documents proved the existence of a royal treasury vault hidden during the Peasants' Revolt, a claim that convinced several peers to bankroll exploratory drilling. The operation made headlines until a sharp-eyed librarian noticed inconsistencies in the Gothic lettering. Further scrutiny revealed the blueprints were traced from a 19th century renovation guide, their ancient details copied verbatim from modern annotations. What makes these hoaxes fascinating isn't just their craftsmanship, but their psychological precision. The perpetrators understood that people crave narrative as much as treasure. The Clunney fraudster wove Templar mythology into his fake diary because he knew the order's mysticism would override skepticism. Holloway's choice of the peasants' revolt tapped into British pride in medieval history. Both schemes exploited a very human truth. We're more willing to believe lies that fit the stories we already tell ourselves about the past. Modern technology has birthed new forms of deception. In 2014, a viral YouTube video claimed to show a secret crypt beneath Rome's Basilica of San Clemente, revealed by a freak earthquake. The footage of frescoed chambers and gilded relics racked up millions of views before digital forensics exposed it as a sophisticated deepfake. The creator had spliced together drone scans of real catacombs with AI-generated imagery, even mimicking the graininess of low-light camera work. More recently, a German art collective fabricated an entire monastic hoard using 3D printed replicas of known relics, then planted them in a fake excavation site near Trier. Their goal, to protest what they called the commodification of sacred history. Ironically, their stunt proved how easily the line between archaeology and performance can blur. These deceptions leave a paradoxical legacy. While they waste resources and muddy historical understanding, they also inadvertently preserve forgotten skills. The Clunney forger's pigment techniques are now studied by conservationists restoring actual medieval art. Holloway's forged blueprints became a case study in detecting document fraud, helping authenticate genuine discoveries. Even the San Clemente deepfake advanced LiDAR technology as researchers developed new algorithms to distinguish between real and synthesized scans. The most enduring lesson from these hoaxes isn't about the tricks themselves, but about why they work. Every generation gets the monastic mysteries it deserves, whether 19th century treasure hunts fueled by nationalism or modern viral stunts playing on digital naivety. The vaults may be fake, but the longing they exploit is achingly real. The desire to peel back layers of time and touch the secrets we're convinced must be waiting just beneath the surface. The burden of secrecy etched itself into the very souls of medieval monks, shaping minds as profoundly as it shaped their hidden chambers. Imagine spending decades knowing truths that could topple kings or unravel faith, truths so volatile that even a whispered confession might damn you. For Brother Gerbert of Clunney, that weight manifested in physical tremors. His 11th century journal describes hands shaking so violently during Mass that he dropped the chalice, fearing God struck him for the manuscripts he'd concealed beneath the infirmary floor. Modern scholars analyzing his account suspect severe anxiety, exacerbated by sleep deprivation from nighttime vigils guarding the Abbey's forbidden texts. Yet not all monks crumbled under the pressure, some thrived on it. Take the enigmatic figure of Abbot Suger of St. Denis, who boasted in his writings about the sweet torment of knowing royal scandals that could make princes kneel. For him, secrecy became a source of power, a spiritual adrenaline that heightened his connection to the divine. His contemporary, Hugh of Lincoln, took a darker path, carving self-inflicted crosses into his thighs whenever he transcribed banned medical texts, a ritual cleansing for handling, knowledge too sharp for mortal hands. These extremes reveal the spectrum of monastic psychology, where one man saw sacred duty, another saw inescapable sin. The isolation cut deepest in communal life. Benedictine rules demanded monks eat, pray, and sleep together, yet those guarding vaults lived a double existence. At Fountains Abbey, archaeologists found graffiti in a hidden scriptorium reading, "Among 30 brothers I am alone." The irony was crushing. Men who took vows of fellowship became prisoners of their own knowledge. Even confession offered no relief. How does one repent for secrets they're sworn to keep? Some developed elaborate coping mechanisms. The Carthusians of Chartreuse practiced a coded form of absolution, whispering sins into the earth's ear by burying confessional notes in sealed tubes beneath their gardens. Physical spaces mirrored this psychological division. Monasteries often had the sinner's stair, narrow, isolated steps leading to hidden chambers, designed to induce claustrophobia as a reminder of the spiritual peril ahead. At Melk Abbey, monks tasked with relic protection slept in cells with labyrinthine carvings on the ceilings, visual puzzles meant to occupy minds that might otherwise fixate on their burdens. The architecture of secrecy became an architecture of mental control, every corridor and vault designed to shape thought as much as conceal objects. The most heartbreaking evidence comes from medical remains. Skeletons excavated at Hirsau Abbey show higher rates of tooth grinding and spinal curvature among older monks, telltale signs of chronic stress. One skull bears grooves along the hairline where its owner apparently scratched obsessively, a condition modern forensic pathologists link to extreme anxiety. These weren't weak men, they were souls stretched taut between heaven and earth, bearing knowledge like a crown of tharks. Yet in this torment we find unexpected beauty. The very texts they risked sanity to preserve often contain marginal prayers for strength. "Lord, let my hands be steady though my heart falters." At Clairvaux, a scribe left a fingerprint in ink next to such a plea, a fleeting moment when the guardian of secrets reached for comfort across the centuries. Their legacy isn't just hidden treasure, but the raw humanity etched into every trembling line of preserved truth. These monks remind us that the greatest vaults weren't made of stone, but of the mind, and sometimes the most sacred things we hide are our own breaking points. The Freemasons built their lodges on symbols and handshakes, but medieval monks constructed their secrecy into the very stones of their monasteries. While both groups prized hidden knowledge, the monks' concealment carried a divine mandate. They weren't just preserving secrets, they were protecting what they believed to be sacred truths entrusted to them by God. Where Masonic rituals relied on oaths sworn in shadowed rooms, monastic vows were public spectacles, their very visibility masking the deeper silences beneath. This paradox defined their approach. The more transparent their devotion appeared, the more effectively they could obscure the treasures and texts tucked behind altars or beneath choir stalls. The Rosicrucians, with their alchemical manuscripts and coded manifestos, shared the monks' passion for esoteric knowledge, but with a crucial difference. Rosicrucian secrecy was aspirational, designed to attract the intellectually worthy. Monastic concealment, by contrast, was defensive. When the monks of Monte Cassino buried Aristotle's rediscovered works in the 12th century, they weren't seeking enlightened initiates. They were hiding ideas too volatile for an era when philosophy could be heresy. Their vaults functioned less like libraries and more like quarantine chambers, isolating dangerous knowledge until the world was ready. Even the Vatican's famed secret archives operate differently. While the Church's central repository restricts access to sensitive documents, its secrecy is bureaucratic, a matter of classified shelves and guarded reading rooms. Medieval monastic vaults, on the other hand, were architectural feats of active deception. At Ely Cathedral, the so-called Prior's Door looks like a simple decorative arch until you press a specific leaf carving, causing a section of the wall to pivot. This wasn't just storage, it was performance, a physical sleight of hand that turned sacred spaces into theaters of misdirection. What truly set monastic secrecy apart was its dual nature. Unlike purely clandestine groups, monks wielded their visibility as a weapon. When royal inspectors arrived at Clunney, the abbot would stage elaborate processions displaying just enough relics and wealth to satisfy curiosity while diverting attention from the real treasures. Their strategy echoed the biblical concept of hiding in the light, using the expectations of piety to cloak dissent. A gold-plated reliquary might gleam conspicuously on the altar, while the authentic relic rested in a plain wooden box beneath the baker's oven. The Templars' underground networks offer the closest parallel, but with a fatal distinction. When the order fell in the 14th century, their secrets died with them because their power depended on exclusivity. Monastic knowledge, however, was collective, passed down through generations of abbots in whispered initiation rituals. At Canterbury, archaeologists found a tiny silver key buried with a 12th century prior, its teeth matching a lock mechanism in the bell tower's foundation. The message was clear: some secrets weren't just kept, they were inherited like sacred trust. These comparisons reveal a profound truth about human nature. We hide things differently depending on what we fear. The Freemasons feared the unworthy, the Rosicrucians feared ignorance, but the monks feared power itself, the crushing weight of kings and popes who might distort or destroy what they didn't understand. Their vaults weren't just physical spaces, they were acts of defiance, a vow whispered into stone that some truths are too fragile for the light of their time, but too precious to be lost to darkness forever. Behind the cloistered walls of medieval convents, women wielded secrecy as deftly as their male counterparts, often with even greater ingenuity born of necessity. At the Abbey of Fontevraud in 12th century France, Abbess Matilda of Anjou didn't just hide forbidden texts. She turned her nuns' embroidery into a clandestine communication network. Coded stitches in altar cloths conveyed messages to sympathetic monasteries, their floral patterns hiding maps of safe houses for scholars fleeing persecution. One surviving chasuble bears a seemingly decorative border that, when read as a cipher, reveals instructions for locating a buried chest of Cathar scriptures, a heresy punishable by death if discovered. The physical spaces women adapted for secrecy tell their own stories. While monks favored grand architectural deceptions, nuns often repurposed domestic objects with subtle brilliance. At the convent of Santa Clara in Coimbra, a 14th century bread oven concealed a hollow compartment behind its firebox, large enough to shelter a fugitive friar during Inquisition raids. The heat kept pursuers at bay, while ventilation came through disguised flues that doubled as chimneys for the infirmary. Elsewhere, nunneries exploited gendered assumptions. Who would suspect a birthing chair in the midwife's quarters to have a false seat storing apothecary scrolls on contraception and abortion. Historical biases have erased much of their legacy, but fragmentary records hint at sophisticated systems. The mystic Hildegard of Bingen allegedly trained her sisters in silent singing, using Gregorian chant rhythms to transmit warnings during inspections. At Los Huelgas in Spain, abbesses maintained duplicate account books, one for bishops showing modest donations, another tracking real wealth in ink that only appeared when brushed with lemon juice. Their greatest advantage lay in being underestimated. When male inspectors visited, nuns perfected the art of playing pious and ignorant, all while smuggling texts beneath their voluminous habits. Some convents became nerve centers for intellectual resistance. The Benedictines of Gandersheim in Germany ran a scriptorium where female scribes copied pagan classics under the guise of transcribing saints' lives. A 10th century psalter from the Abbey contains barely visible undertext, the original parchment scraped clean of Ovid's erotic poetry, but still detectable under ultraviolet light. These women didn't just preserve knowledge, they weaponized aesthetics, crafting illuminated manuscripts so beautiful that church officials hesitated to burn them even when heresy was suspected. The Reformation's violence against nunneries reveals how threatening their secrecy was perceived to be. When Protestant mobs sacked Sion Abbey in England, they were shocked to find not just hidden Catholic relics, but a trove of political letters between noblewomen, proving the convent had been a hub for anti-Henry VIII sentiment. The sisters' final act of defiance, burning their own archives rather than letting them be weaponized against their families. What survives today are whispers wrapped in enigma, a lead token stamped with a rose at Weenhossen Abbey, its purpose unknown until scholars realized it matched indentations in the convent's account books, proving the nuns operated a clandestine lending library. Or the mysterious dancing nun carvings at Hohenberg Abbey, dismissed as folklore until someone noticed their poses aligned with the movements needed to open hidden wall panels. These fragments form a counter-narrative to history's assumption that medieval women were passive. Their vaults weren't always underground, but woven into the fabric of daily life, guarded by the ultimate camouflage, being overlooked. The moment a monastic vault is breached in modern times, the real excavation begins not with shovels, but with legal briefs. Take the explosive 2012 case of the San Zone de Covero hoard in Spain, where construction workers stumbled upon a sealed chamber beneath a ruined monastery. Inside gleamed 12th century chalices, jeweled reliquaries, and most controversially, a charter granting the land to the monks by King Alfonso VII. The discovery ignited a three-way legal firestorm. The Spanish government claimed it as national patrimony. The Catholic Archdiocese of Santiago asserted ecclesiastical rights, and a local noble family produced 800-year-old documents alleging their ancestors had donated the treasures. The courtroom battles that followed revealed how little has changed since medieval monks first buried these objects. What makes these disputes so contentious is the tangled web of historical ownership. Unlike typical archaeological finds, monastic treasures often come with centuries of paperwork, some authentic, some forged, all open to interpretation. In 2018, a similar conflict erupted over the Hungarian crown jewels, found walled up in a Benedictine abbey. The government cited a 1947 law declaring all royal regalia state property. The Order of Saint Benedict countered with a 1466 papal bull granting them perpetual guardianship, and then came the surprise plaintiff, a Swiss investment firm claiming the jewels collateralized long overdue loans to King Matthias Corvinus. The case stalled for years over a single question: can a 500-year-old debt still be collected? The human element complicates matters further. When a storm collapsed part of Whitby Abbey's coastal cliffs in 2019, exposing a previously unknown storage chamber, descendants of 16th century donors flooded English courts with ancestral claims. One family even produced a remarkably preserved loan agreement, scribbled on sheepskin. Their ancestor had apparently lent silver candlesticks to the monks until God's kingdom comes. The judge's ruling cut to the heart of the matter. Theological deadlines hold no weight in common law. Yet such cases keep coming, fueled by genealogy websites that make tracing medieval lineage startlingly easy. Technology has added new wrinkles to these battles. Ground-penetrating radar scans at Wittenberg's former Franciscan monastery revealed underground cavities in 2021. But when excavation began, the team hit an unexpected obstacle: a 2005 patent held by a German tech company for subsurface cultural heritage detection methods. The firm demanded royalties for any finds made using similar technology, creating a bizarre standoff over who owned the right to discover hidden history. The case was eventually dismissed, but not before raising alarming questions about privatizing archaeological exploration. Perhaps no modern legal fight better mirrors medieval tensions than the ongoing saga of the Monte Cassino manuscripts. When water damage exposed a forgotten archive beneath the Abbey in 2016, scholars celebrated until the Vatican's lawyers invoked a 1734 papal edict granting the Holy See ownership of all written works concerning faith in monastic possession. Italy's culture ministry fired back with Napoleonic-era secularization laws. Meanwhile, a Greek Orthodox monastery on Mount Athos filed a claim based on marginal notes suggesting some texts were copied from their library during the 15th century. The bitter irony, the manuscripts in question were medieval legal texts about property disputes. These conflicts reveal an uncomfortable truth. Every uncovered vault becomes a mirror reflecting our own era's power struggles. Whether it's nationalist governments invoking cultural heritage laws, churches asserting divine stewardship, or descendants weaponizing ancient contracts, the players have changed, but the game remains eerily familiar. The real treasure being fought over isn't gold or parchment, it's the right to control the narrative of history itself. And as long as monastery walls keep yielding their secrets, courtrooms will echo with the same question monks grappled with centuries ago. Who gets to decide what stays hidden and what comes to light? The race to uncover monastic vaults is accelerating at a pace medieval monks could never have imagined, but with each technological leap forward, we inherit their ancient dilemma. Ground-penetrating radar now peers through 3 meters of solid stone, while multispectral imaging resurrects faded ink from crumbled parchment. In Switzerland, researchers recently tested drones equipped with cosmic ray detectors to map hidden chambers, and in Italy, AI algorithms scour centuries of financial records for patterns that might pinpoint forgotten treasuries. These tools promise revelations, but they also force us to confront uncomfortable questions. When we can virtually unwrap a lead-sealed reliquary without breaking its seal, do we violate the spiritual intent behind its concealment? Some discoveries demand radical new approaches to preservation. The breathing vault of Pannonhalma Abbey in Hungary presents a perfect case study. Found in 2021, this underground chamber maintains a self-regulating microclimate, its walls lined with a medieval mortar mix that absorbs and releases moisture to stabilize humidity. Opening it risks collapsing this delicate balance, so archaeologists devised a solution straight from science fiction. A robotic arm with micro-pincers, originally designed for microsurgery, now extracts artifacts through a forearm-sized portal while lasers monitor air composition in real time. The system allows study without disturbance, honoring the monks' original preservation instincts with 21st century ingenuity. Yet not all challenges are technical. The ethical weight of displaying these finds grows heavier with each revelation. Take the contentious debate over the Casket of Tears, uncovered at Melk Abbey, a silver reliquary containing what forensic analysis confirmed were human blood, sweat, and tears collected from persecuted Waldensian heretics. Museum curators argued for public exhibition as a testament to religious oppression, while descendant communities pleaded for private reburial. The compromise, a holographic display that allows virtual handling, while the actual casket remains in consecrated ground, satisfied no one completely, but set a precedent for balancing historical value against spiritual sensitivity. The specter of commercialization looms equally large. After drones identified potential vaults beneath Mont Saint-Michel in 2023, the French government faced pressure to license augmented reality tours showing real-time treasure hunting. Historians warned this would turn sacred secrecy into entertainment, while tourism boards saw dollar signs. The resulting legislation mandating that all scans remain classified until reviewed by both scholars and monastic orders created a model for responsible discovery. It acknowledges an uncomfortable truth. In an age where viral content drives revenue, some secrets may be too fragile for the spotlight they attract. Perhaps the most profound shift is in how we define ownership. The 2025 Leon Protocol established that artifacts with unclear provenance must remain within 50 kilometers of their discovery site unless all potential claimant groups consent. This upended centuries of finders-keepers colonialism, but implementation gets messy. When thermal imaging revealed a cache of Mozarabic texts beneath a Spanish convent, 17 different entities from the Vatican to a Moroccan cultural foundation filed claims based on medieval migration patterns. The case drags on, proving that the monks' habit of burying contentious items might have been wiser than we realized. The future of these discoveries lies in recognizing that technology outpaces ethics. We can now detect a single gold coin buried beneath a cathedral's foundation. But do we have the wisdom to handle what glitters? The answer may lie in blending old and new using AI to reconstruct fragmented texts without disturbing their resting places, or letting LiDAR maps guide respectful study rather than invasive digs. The greatest tribute to those medieval guardians wouldn't be plundering their vaults, but honoring their conviction that some truths unfold best in their own time. As we stand on the brink of rewriting history with each new scan and algorithm, we might find our most valuable tool isn't a drone or supercomputer, but